Good afternoon to you all. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you've had a good lunch. My fear is that I've had a very good lunch. So moderating after lunch can be a challenge. But I think I could not but accept this moderation from my colleagues because regional platforms on accountability and role and functions for Asia Pacific, as per the UN Secretary General's message that I mentioned this morning, will be coordinated at the regional commissions level. So I thought it would be good to kind of have a good dialogue between us on your advice and ideas to go forward. So I have the distinction to introduce my fellow panelists. First, Mr. Jalil Buzrukov, head of the Scientific Information Center of the Interstate Commission on Sustainable Development for Central Asian countries from Tajikistan. He's on my right. He has been an active member of this Interstate Commission on Sustainable Development, and he has been involved in the sub-regional cooperation mechanism over a decade, as well as in the preparation of the Central Asia Regional Environmental Action Plan and Convention. I have also to my left Mr. Alfred Schuster, Development Cooperation Advisor, Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, who sits on the Pacific constituency seat of the Steering Committee of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, and has advocated for Pacific positions and wider recognition of the unique development circumstances of small island developing states, leading up to the negotiations of the Busan Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. So we will learn firsthand from him on how the regional and global partnerships ought to talk to each other. Dr. Malay Wungssuroj, she is the Deputy Director General and Chief Information Officer with the National Statistical Office of Thailand for over 20 years. Her academic background is statistics and informatics, and she is to my extreme left. She is currently responsible for the development of the National Statistical System of Thailand, particularly modernizing statistical production and services. Again, we hope to hear from her ASEAN perspectives. Ms. Govind Galkar, who is second to my right, is the Senior Advisor to Landesa Rural Development Institute from India and a member of the Regional Council of the Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law, and Development. Earlier, Ms. Galkar worked in UN Women and at the Asian Institute of Technology in Bangkok. She focused on women's access to justice with attention to land rights and economic empowerment of women. And as we know, gender issues have been well represented in the SDGs. Ms. Galkar is well published with 12 books and numerous articles to her credit. With this introduction of the panelists, I do want to mention that we will have a set of we will have three discussants who I will introduce as we move into the session. So with this background, let me say a few words about what this session is about, but my comments will be very brief. This session has been structured in midst of the national and the global monitoring and accountability. The middle tier is going to be a very important tier in trying to talk to the two tiers at the bottom and the upper end. And they will be a very important platform to make sure that the reviews and accountabilities are well structured, drawing from the existing experiences, but bringing in some new dimensions. So this session will discuss the relevance and significance of regional monitoring and accountability in this context. This critical tier for managing and overseeing the regional sustainable development agenda will be key to the UN system, as Secretary General has pointed out. On one hand, it will facilitate assessment and cross-fertilization of best practices and experiences at the national levels. On the other hand, it helps keeps national governments and other stakeholders abreast of the emerging challenges and the dynamics of the global sustainable development. Regional monitoring and accountability has the potential to offer, as was pointed out by Amina this morning, to offer a peer review mechanism. She mentioned that we need a peer review mechanism. So you need a peer review mechanism at a national level, but you need a peer review mechanism at a regional level too. Because somebody has to judge the progress or lack thereof, somebody has to, as an honest broker, identify issues and challenges facing the region and offer regional perspectives on gaps and problems in the global partnerships also. The regional institutional mechanism would also offer an opportunity for the regional community and stakeholders, and we will have civil society voice, businesses voice, philanthropic and related bodies, to support the implementation of sustainable development. And these voices will not only be at the national and global, but will be represented at the regional level. The annual Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development as a key regional platform that I covered this morning has the potential to evolve an effective regional platform for monitoring and accountability on sustainable development and the Sustainable Development Goals, building on the best practices of existing sub-regional and regional models where feasible. So we don't want, but we would like to hear your views, but I think in order to save resources and save time, it's better to mainstream monitoring and accountability within the Asia-Pacific Sustainable Development. And since Thailand is a co-host, towards the end, it would be great to hear from you your perspectives on this, but also from other member states, because we would need your guidance to be fed into this process. In this session, we look forward to the views, of course, of our panelists on how regional monitoring and accountability could be institutionalized, and hearing from them about examples of existing frameworks and best practices of the sub-regional as well as regional levels, with particular emphasis on the role of course, as you see from your platform, that of the regional commissions and the Intergovernmental Asia-Pacific Sustainable Development Forum in delivering on regional monitoring and accountability for the post-2015 development agenda. So with this kind of overview, I very much encourage the panelists to gear their remarks to feed into this process, because your advice, your support, and your reflections will feed into our finalizing the paper. I'll call on Mr. Jalil Bozrokov, who's the head of, as I said, of the Scientific Information Center of the Interstate Commission on Sustainable Development of Central Asia. This Commission of Central Asia is one of the two commissions under the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea, and since 2005, when the Regional Environmental Action Plan for Central Asia was approved, the ICSD has evolved into an effective monitoring and accountability mechanism for its implementation, all the while involving civil society and scientific experts in the decision-making progress. If anybody knows the issues of RLC, you would know how important this Commission's role is. So I'd like to turn to you and ask a specific question. Could you describe this ICSD mechanism more than what I have laid it out, and share with us the good practices and lessons learned which could benefit the establishment of a regional accountability mechanism? What roles can sub-regional organizations such as yours have in a future regional accountability mechanism for post-2015 development agenda? Thank you, Mr. Busrock. I count on your support and advice. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. I shall do my best to respond on the various points that you've just raised. I hope I'm not speaking too fast. Пока нормально. With your permission, I shall be speaking Russian. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings. The chairman of the Committee for the Environmental Protection of Tajikistan and chairman of ICSD has been unable to attend in relation to with urgent matters of state, and he conveys his apologies and his best wishes for success. On his behalf and in my own capacity, I would like to express our gratitude to the organizers of this meeting for the invitation to take part in this discussion on very important issues for the region, for Central Asia in particular, such important issues as improving the implementation of the post-2015 agenda. We do hope that the partnership relationships between countries in Central Asia and international organizations, in particular institutions and programs of the UN, will make it possible to strengthen and qualitatively enhance our partnerships. The countries of Central Asia, as countries of the whole world, are consistently seeking in their strategies and programs to implement the principles of sustainable development stemming from the Rio Declaration of 1992, the decisions of the Johannesburg Summit 2002, and of the Sustainable Development Conference of 2012. The development of our cooperation in Central Asia is acquiring an increasingly clear outlines with targeted program activities in different fields of the economy and in the environment. In our region, which is known for its historically unprecedented environmental disasters, such as the drying out of the Aral Sea and the crisis condition of our water and land resources, the very high level of our man-made pollution, all this is taking place in a context of persistently high levels of poverty and morbidity. This situation requires the development of new mechanisms for cooperation. We have thus worked increasingly with an increasing array of national agencies, of interested international organizations, donors, private sector actors, and representatives of the civil society. We have decided for coordination of our joint activity and increased cooperation in the region to establish this international Interstate Commission on Sustainable Development, ICSD, and the Commission can promote sustainable development in the sub-region through programs and policies in the field of sustainable development. The membership of this commission involves environmental agencies of Central Asia, deputy economy ministers, and scientists. Along with its structures, it has already conducted considerable work on capacity building for cooperation, developing a database on sustainable development, and involving civil society. We have adopted a regional plan of action as a single overarching program in Central Asia. We have conducted a lot of work in its major targeted areas of action. We've carried out pilot projects. We have a system for decision-making. It is necessary now to renew and update it. And we need to update it in particular in relation to emergent climate change issues, and bearing in mind also the outcomes of Rio+20. It is necessary for this instrument to be improved in order to better monitor progress in our region, especially in the post-2015 agenda.
Overall, the Commission can be used as an appropriate platform for monitoring and providing accountability for the post-2015 development agenda, and also to implement the agreed development goals. Because it is so representative at the highest level, the Commission can serve as a kind of bridge between the countries of Central Asia and the Asia-Pacific Sustainable Development Forum, and also later on with the High-Level Policy Forum. Moreover, the Civil Society Council of the Commission and the Central Asian Youth Network can provide an integrated and transparent decision-making process through actively involving them in the activities of the Commission. In 2009, the heads of state of Central Asia expressed their readiness to improve the organizational structure and the basic legal treaty text language of the document. And the Commission, with support from the UNECE, carried out an assessment on the task of strengthening the legal basis for the work on sustainable development within the framework of its mandate. The result of this assessment was recommendations and a roadmap for implementing these recommendations, targeted at enhancing the functional potential of the Commission and its various divisions. We expect these draft recommendations and the roadmap to be adopted at the next Commission session this autumn, bearing in mind whatever comments come in from the Central Asian countries. Together with UNEP and the EU, the Commission is involved in mainstreaming the green economy and sustainable energy for Central Asia too. In short, we have established a strong basis for cooperation in all these issues of environment and sustainable development in the region. And we hope that this will be the impetus for a new stage in the relationship between the Commission and the UN institutions and other international organizations. I hope I have managed to cover most of the aspects of this issue. If not, please come back to me and I will answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for outlining the pros and cons of this institute and offering that this can be a larger sub-regional platform for dialogue on the sustainable development. Now I'd like to turn to Mr. Alfred Schuster, who, as I mentioned earlier, has been involved in strengthening the development coordination in the Pacifics through this very useful compact. It would be useful, Mr. Schuster, to hear from you how the compact demonstrates as an effective sub-regional accountability mechanism, and what are the main features and procedures and elements that we can draw upon for shaping a future regional monitoring and accountability mechanism. Over to you, Mr. Schuster.
Thank you, moderator. And let me just begin with words of apology and also greetings from my Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, who's unable to be here. I've been tasked to just give you an overview and some insights on the Forum Compact on strengthening development coordination in the Pacific and how it demonstrates itself to be an effective regional, or in this case, in the context of the Asia-Pacific, a sub-regional accountability mechanism, and what are its main features and procedures. Essentially, the Forum Compact is an integrated approach to accounting for development outcomes and results, such as the MDGs, or at our sub-regional level, what used to be the Pacific Plan. That has now changed after our leaders met last week. Now that's been recast to being a framework for Pacific regionalism, but I won't go into details on that. But it's also an integrated approach to accounting for commitments made on strengthening the institutions and capacities of governments to improve the delivery of their development programs and services that are funded or resourced both domestically and through external resources like ODA. So how does it demonstrate itself to be an effective accountability mechanism? Well, I'll touch on three main drivers. The first one is that, and as Beseta Nomeasimi mentioned earlier, it's a compact that was adopted by our political leaders. So from the outset, there's political commitment and mandate given to monitoring of development and effectiveness of development efforts. And I think that's a critical point and a pivotal one, given the global discourse around the need and the significance of political commitments and accountabilities to the development agenda. And for the Pacific itself, that's a significant step because it demonstrates that Pacific leaders themselves recognize their pivotal role in driving accountability and being accountable themselves in reinforcing these measures of progress against the development priorities, and also again in assessing the processes and procedures that support both resourcing, priority setting, implementation, and monitoring of these development goals. And if you recall the points of the UNFPA Regional Director, who alluded earlier this morning that enhanced political ownership equates to enhanced political accountability. The second point is that it complements national efforts to advocate for and also support or supplement the implementation of the regular assessments that I mentioned earlier of the country systems for development planning, budgeting, public financial management, and aid management systems. Similarly, at the national level, it fosters an inclusive approach. So the Compact advocates this inclusiveness to regular assessments. And there's been mention of a peer review process. And we're happy to announce that over the last 5 years, the Pacific region has undergone a peer review process which brings together Pacific Island countries and through peer-to-peer exchange, drawing on each other's experiences and strengthening those country systems that we advocate and demand, if you like, our development partners to use. So it's a peer review system that also promotes inclusiveness at the country level, whereby it's not just the voice, if you like, of governments on how to improve the systems for development, but it also brings in the voice of civil societies, of youth, and of the private sector to improve these country systems or reshape these country systems. And again, I mentioned earlier the point that it's also the voice of other Pacific Island countries and officials as part of the peer review team that help shape some of these improvements. The third point is that the Forum Compact is able to localize the global accountability agenda and tailor the global indicators based on Pacific country capacities to collate and assess data, but also localizing the accountability measures based on what's really real on the ground for the Pacific. And I think one of the things that we find, which perhaps is one of the lessons learned from the MDGs, is that the application of the measures and the targets at the global level doesn't necessarily match or are fit for purpose for small administrations and capacities like in the Pacific. And I think this point is also critical where there are parallel global accountability agendas that seek the same information and I draw on the UN Development Cooperation Forum and the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, which seeks to achieve the same outcomes, seeks to strengthen accountabilities through the same monitoring and procedures and indicators. So I think it's important that when it comes to small administrations like us in the Pacific, that there is some clarity amongst the global agenda, a global accountability agenda setters, if you like, on how these things can be better translated at the country level. And we'd like to think that the work that we're doing through the Forum Compact, we've established, drawn from those different global indicators, a regional set of minimum monitoring indicators that are able to capture and consolidate the realities on the ground. But at the same time, it contextualizes our Pacific contribution to the global monitoring process. And whether that be on monitoring of the MDGs, whether that be on mutual accountability under the UNDCF Mutual Accountability Survey, or whether that's on the annual monitoring on effective development cooperation. We're able to, through the peer review process, and I'll go into a number of the other features, capture evidence and information, and I think to able to contribute to what's really happening when it comes to monitoring development progress and the systems and the procedures that support its implementation. So what are the key features? Well, there's a peer review process, and I've already mentioned that. And that's going to be expanded to a peer review of development partners, where countries will look at the processes and mechanisms of donors and give some feedback on how to improve in relation to their partnership arrangements with Pacific Island countries. I notice I've got time, but I can expand more if there are any questions, but thank you.
Thank you for respecting the time. I'd like to now turn to Dr. Wungs Sirohe, the National Statistics Office head of the Thailand. She has extensive experience, as I have pointed out, but I think it would be useful that if you could go beyond your national level platform and give us some perspectives on how regional platform has worked in your experience, which is the ASEAN, and how one can strengthen the capacity sitting at the regional platform, capacity and coordination sitting at a regional platform for national accountability using statistics development as an example. So thanks for being here.
I would like to share 2-3 points here. First of all, I have to stress that the data and statistics will become very important in sustainable development goal, and during the implementation of the SDG or development goal agenda, the data and statistics will display or show you that how the achievement of the goal are met, and to ensure that the key stakeholder to provide quality or timely data. It is important that statistical development play a role. So data is important, and in the context of Thailand, as an experience from MDG, we have experience of some difficulty in collecting and providing good and timely statistics because it is scattered around or among the different agencies, and we think we need some of the to fill the gap of collecting data. And the lesson has learned with some amendment of the law or statistical acts that we can establish some mechanism of statistical master plan of the case of Thailand, and we think the mechanism of master plan and the committee and subcommittee who work among the different function or line ministry, we can have a channel for collecting or compiling data to measure the indicators for MDG. And this will link to the SDG in a way that the Sustainable Development Goal or targets that will come with a set of indicators or agree indicator that will what show or will be need for implementer during the monitoring or evaluating the SDG. So in this aspect, in the statistical development, one of the key issue is data revolution. In this data revolution initiative, some of the international organization has invested a lot of effort to see how data can help or can make use of the power of the data in measuring, and not only measuring of the goal that we are going to meet. It can show how the drawback or the gap is still remain, and in remedy process can make use of the data. So the availability and the quality of basic statistics that produced by each country have to be improved, and it needs a significant investment and new measurement to be developed in the area of sustainable development. In this regard, to mechanism already exists in place in the regional arena. One is ESCAP, Committee on Statistics, and in this mechanism, it is important that it needs to be strengthened in order to capture or to support the measuring of the SDG. And the other mechanism is ASEAN, and in a smaller group among the ASEAN country, there's ASEAN statistic that every year has a commission on the meeting head of statistics that can be used for the mechanism at the regional level. So to direct answer to the question, I would like to point out that we need a regional program for coordination at all levels, from global and regional and national, to ensure that the sustainable development goal implementer or actor have commitment to provide quality data in order to measure the achievement. And then from the regional program that can put in place of ESCAP, Commission and ASEAN, we need further for data collection that we need SDG business architecture, actually for the data and statistics to produce and give a service for data, and to ensure that the standardized process of statistic production and services, as well as the core set of agreed indicator that can be provided. And from that extending from the architecture to have really IT platform in order to help the provider of data and the user really to get the quality and timely of data to support the evaluation and monitoring the implementation of the SDG. At the focal point for each country and at the regional level is also important that we need to set up. And the most important, the last one, is capacity building. As a regional platform has served as statistical institute for training, the SDG can be one of the issue or one of the important program for training, for capacity building, to ensure that all the human resource is ready to measure. And keep in mind that each country has different realities, so all the regional platform like ESCAP or ASEAN have to take care that each country has enough resource and go on the same direction or ally in order to meet the same goal for all dimensions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Two important perspectives, regional platforms, and institutions, say ASEAN and ESCAP, but I would not forget Asian Development Bank. Partnership is quite critical in standardizing approaches and practices at the regional platform, and use of IT ought to be encouraged in the process. So thank you, Dr. Malia. I would now like to turn to our final panelist for this session, Ms. Govind Galkar. Before inviting our discussions, before I invite our discussants to share their viewpoints, so just a heads up to the discussants. Ms. Govind Galkar, you have been the senior advisor to this very important regional Rural Development Institute of India, and also worked on various platforms on women, law, and development issues. Could you briefly describe not only your experience on these various platforms, of any examples that you may have at the regional level, but also describe more specifically civil society's proposal and outline the key elements that are intended to contribute to a regional monitoring and accountability framework which could support the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. Over to you, Ms. Galkar.
Thank you very much, Ms. Akhtar, Ms. Mohammed, distinguished chair, distinguished participants. I would really talk about what has been the major concerns of civil society organizations in the region, and how they can support to overcome these concerns. One has been the deepened poverty with growth economies. That has been, we have the two major countries in this region, India and China, and both are suffering from the deepened poverty and also deepened inequalities. Inequality between and within countries, and gender and social inequalities. So these has been the second concern. Third is that which we cannot overlook. We cannot talk of sustainable development if half of the population suffers from the high violence within home and outside home. So high violence against women in private and public spheres is another concern of the civil society. And the environmentally destructive pattern of production, consumption, along with climate change impact. So these are the four major concerns. I was trying to sum up various concerns that has been the focus of attention of civil society. Ensuring accountability to the people means implementing fundamental structural changes in order to overcome these concerns in political and economic governance, structural changes in political economic governance, and also reorienting production and consumption systems in consultation with civil society. Greater accountability and transparency means this was the recently in consultation or in knowledge of UN ESCAP, a newly formed Asia Pacific Regional Civil Society Engaged Mechanism was set up, and we outlined some 5 shifts that are required. And out of these 5 shifts, these were that to achieve redistributive justice. That means that government must reduce inequality between and within countries. And then the second was to economic justice, so that good employment and dignified life and capabilities for all. Third was to achieve social and gender justice. Gender was very much attention giving the kind of part of it, that eliminate all discriminatory laws and policies on the basis of gender and sexual orientation. Gender parity in political and economic governance and decision making. I think we should not be misled by overrepresentation of women here, that it is the same story at the national and regional level. That is important to point out. Eliminate all forms of gender-based violence done with impunity in home and outside in public places. To achieve ecological justice, we have been the fourth concern. And fifth concern, in which I want to say a little bit more on the accountability to the people. So, accountability to the peoples means implementation requires a democratic and just governance at the regional level. Transparency and that enables people to inform decisions over their lives and communities and futures. So, Accountability is giving power to the powerless. I liked very much Ms. Mohammed when she said in the morning that giving voice to the voiceless. I just wanted to add a footnote, and sharing power also, giving power to the powerless. In terms of the distribution of the productive assets like land, housing, and other kind of resources and capabilities. So that would be really the accountability here means in terms of paying attention to women, youth, and the most marginalized to be part of free, prior, and informed decision making. Develop local capacities and innovations, not only transfer of technology. Besides transfer of technology, which has usually to go away, but what has to be done, the local innovations are required and capacities and capabilities are required. So what is important on this kind of accountability is the single most agenda, that is what important, and where the civil society can provide some support to Asia Pacific Forum on the sustainable development. Not because that in terms of they should be consulted, but because of they have the technical expertise in terms of they are based at they are linked with the grassroots, and they meet each other and they meet more each other with regard to in the new technological age. So participation of civil society and its leaders in decision making and in accountability mechanism, not as observers, but as participants of the policy making, regional policy making, it should be considered. There are two regional kind of SAARC and ASEAN, and probably we can begin with them and how they can engage and plus come together. Institutionalize civil society participation with gender balanced and gender sensitivity in all sustainable development process. My last point would be I like this SDGs 1 point because respect for national spaces is there. Eventually, even at the regional level, this has to come from the local and national spaces, consultation with civil society and peer review mechanisms at the regional and sub-regional level, and women's participation in the adequate numbers. That would be important. There is a kind of slogan my civil society friends have said, and they said I should not get up from here without saying that. We should leave no one behind and letting no one get away. That was their message that I wanted to convey it to you. Thank you.
So thank you once again for reinforcing the point of trying to get leaders' involvement on the regional platforms, which is the key message, and we do understand the civil society's emphasis on variety of elements, which are somewhat harder to monitor, but we count on civil society to be able to bring in, fill in the gap. Mr. John Hyde, I'd like to invite you to share your thoughts for knowledge of all the participants here. He's the representative of the Asian Forum of Parliamentarians on Population and Development, and he promises me he'll go more on overall, not just population. And he's also the chair of the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption for Ocean region, to briefly highlight in 3 minutes the impacts of national parliamentarians on regional and sub-regional fora to support accountability for the post-2015 development agenda.
Thank you. Look, parliamentarians have a key role in making sure accountability to people is central to the accountability mechanism with transparent targets and measurable results. A crucial role for national parliamentarians is to hold their governments to account and to provide every opportunity for their constituents, through civil society and the media, to have access to the new accountability system. It's a priority for governments to commit to tabling their post-2015 commitments, targets and measurement in their parliaments and enable dialogue and debate. And it's also incumbent that the same discussions and debates can occur on the ground in regional and remote constituencies, as well as through the local government level. AFPPD, in collaboration with national parliaments and CSOs, organised in 2012 and 2013 3 Asia-Pacific Regional Forum on Parliamentarians and the Post-2015 Agenda in Manila, Dhaka and Bali. Now, it's vital that we continue these regional efforts and to ensure that parliamentarians are familiar with the post-2015 development agenda process, that national ministries of foreign affairs should report on their open working group process and the positions promoted by the MOFA during the open working group process. MPs should also ensure that adequate budgeting can support the post-2015 goals and targets. Asia-Pacific is the largest of the UN regions, and we must ensure that the diverse needs and concerns of all our sub-regions are represented. Sub-regional fora in the Pacific have enabled our most isolated and under-resourced nations to be better prepared and more able to contribute to a regional and global agenda. In our region, the 2011 Mechanism for the Review of Implementation of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption provides a model that encompasses country peer review and expert panels. But we need to embrace a mechanism for post-2015 that includes parliamentarians and civil society in its assessment expert panels. If our focus is just on expert technical measurement, we are not being transparent and accountable to the people of our countries, particularly those most at risk and marginalised. Results must measure the impact of change, policies and resources on our people. We need to hear from the people and their representatives who are being directly impacted. Parliamentarians and civil society are then able to feed into regional fora, such as the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. Now, if APFSD is to function as our key regional platform for monitoring and review, integrated into the global high-level political forum, then there has to be agreement in the mechanism on inclusion of parliamentarians and civil society in country delegations, as well as entities in the forum itself, such as through the Asian Pacific Regional CSO engagement mechanism. Now, the inaugural session of APFSD in Pattaya in May this year enabled, at the discretion of the chair, who of course is here, our colleague from Kazakhstan, and we've seen replicated today in the chairing by my parliamentary colleague from Mongolia, that there's been a good level of civil society engagement in these discussion sessions. But the new mechanism needs to formalise this involvement in all the mechanisms, as well as, we believe, parliamentarian and civil society inclusion in outcome document processes. The Secretary-General says that we're moving towards broad agreement on the need for a sustainable development agenda, on the need to ensure that poverty eradication, social justice and environmental concerns are taken together in one framework. What we need now is agreement on a true accountability mechanism with participation of all development actors, which can only be transparent if there's also genuine involvement of parliamentarians and civil society to monitor, review and evaluate the results. Thanks.
It's a very good comprehensive statement. Thank you for sharing your thoughts at a broader level. Now I'd like to turn to our second discussant, Mr. Jerry Bernas. He's the Program Director of ASEAN Corporate Social Responsibility Network. This is an area which has been emphasized quite a bit in the Sustainable Development Dialogue. We really count on your bringing to the perspective of your regional body, which I understand was formed in 2011. And has been promoting corporate social responsibility in line with the emerging desire of the ASEAN to be an economic and integrated community, And this is going to be very instructive for us because amongst the sub-region, ASEAN has a very structured, relatively speaking, institutional mechanism. So it can serve as a role model for monitoring progress of the private sector on corporate social responsibility, and hope that we can get some examples of what the achievements have been. Thank you. Jerry, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity and for the organizers for inviting the ASEAN CSR Network to share our experience here as well today. As you've heard, we are very new, as well as a fairly small regional private sector network, but I hope that some of my insights will be of value to the discussions today. I think first is on how to promote greater accountability within the private sector to meet sustainable development goals or the MDGs. I think first it starts with better communication. I think within the private sector, there's really a lack of understanding of actually what the MDGs are, as well as what the sustainable development goals are, and how they are important for businesses, or why is it important for businesses to contribute to these goals. First, and this communication, I think there needs to be a change in tone of the engagement between the private sector and other sectors, from one of simply looking at the private sector as a financier or a funder of initiatives of either NGOs or official bodies, or when there's a lack of government funding for certain issues, to really greater engagement into looking at how the private sector within its own operations and within its own specific stakeholder groups can really promote, uplift the lives of people and have more responsible business practices. I think this is a particular challenge in ASEAN that we face, that when there's engagement with private sector, it is often to ask for money. Definitely, philanthropy has a very important role in supporting the lack of funding for development programs, especially in less developed countries where there's a budget gap. But I think the greatest impact the private sector can have, especially for large companies, if it can clean up its own operations and have more meaningful impact through its core operations, meaning paying its people correctly, making sure that communities where it operates in are taken care of very well, and that environmental safeguards are put in place. I think that there's room for engagement here. Second is also when with regard to data collection. Often in my experience, especially in the Philippines, when I was working for a body called the League of Corporate Foundations, what we try to track only is investment data. Of how much money the private sector has put in, whether directly into the economy as business investments, or also through philanthropic contributions to NGOs or government programs. Now, increasingly, the CSR and corporate sustainability reporting frameworks are tracking different data. Community investment is only one part of the broader work of corporate social responsibility. And so if CSR is to be used as a platform for greater private sector engagement and contributions to SDGs, there has to be better convergence of one, strategy. Second, better convergence in terms of reporting frameworks. I think there's a lot that has been said earlier with regards to the difficulty of collecting data. Because often when we try to collect data from the private sector, it's after the implementation has already passed. And then we try to align it with the SDGs or MDGs in some form and try to source the data. But if the private sector is better informed of how it can actually track data internally, and what kind of data are needed by regional bodies, for example, in order for the private sector to be able to show its contribution to the SDGs, then it would be a much simpler task. There are a few examples of international commitments or international frameworks that have become better aligned with CSR reporting frameworks. For example, the Global Reporting Initiative Sustainability Reporting Framework, which is one of the more established CSR tools that are in use today, has cross-reference with the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. So it uses the UNGP indicators to be able to show how businesses are making commitments or contributing to respecting their human rights commitments. So hopefully this will also increase in terms of other areas. I mean, ILO is also working with the GRI, so that's also a good development. But I think the SDGs also need to be more closely linked with established corporate reporting frameworks so that there's easier tracking of data. The third is for regional, for all these that we've outlined, I think it's very clear that it needs an effective coordination mechanism. More than just an accountability mechanism. I mean, it starts with an effective coordination mechanism. And I think the most effective is at the sub-regional level. I think we can all agree that even Asia as a whole is just too large to coordinate. And so the sub-regional organizations really play an important role in terms of, one, espousing cross-sectoral dialogue, and developing joint strategies, or if not, if the different sectors can't agree on a joint strategy, at the very least have an understanding of what each other's role is. Because I think, I mean, I'll end with probably saying, paraphrasing a quote I heard at another conference, that basically says, if everyone is accountable, then no one is accountable, really. So it's to the point of having a better clarity of roles. For the private sector, the private sector to a large extent is confused as to what its role is. It knows how to make money, but it's very confused as to how it can really concretely contribute to development goals.
Thank you for all those insights. And now I turn to our last discussant, but the most important partner, representing Asian Development Bank. Ms. Anuradha Rajivan. She's the advisor in the Strategy and Policy Department of the Asian Development Bank, which is really a collaborative arm also for ESCAP. And we'd like to hear from her on ADB's experience in monitoring progress and promoting accountability for development efforts by Asia-Pacific countries, and also providing her perspectives on the joint ADB UNDP ESCAP MDG report, which has become really a very solid document of collaboration. So we look forward to your perspectives on future regional mechanism for monitoring and accountability for the Sustainable Development Agenda. Over to you, Anuradha.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. As the chair mentioned, I'll be sharing ADB's experience as well as, in particular, its external engagement and long-standing partnership with ESCAP and UNDP on monitoring. What ADB has in place in terms of accountability is both prospective and retrospective, which is internal to ADB as a regional bank, so it's a kind of a regional platform, and also jointly external facing with ESCAP and UNDP mainly, and also with the other multilateral development banks. Within ADB, accountability is taken very, very seriously because everything is about money, and then increasingly there are demands from its clients to share knowledge also. So responding to clients, the developing member countries, shareholders, the board of directors, and donors, partners, including UN partners, basically at every level, ADB finds itself having to face accountability as a challenge. And so it has institutionalized accountability mechanisms. Its first tool is aligning its strategies and policies according to a pre-planned long-term corporate strategy, which is called the Strategy 2020, and to check every operation vis-a-vis Strategy 2020. The strategy itself has recently undergone a major review because, as the President has said, the Asia-Pacific region is changing fast, and therefore so must ADB, along with all its development partners. So in order to improve ADB's responsiveness, relevance, and effectiveness, this strategy itself has undergone change, and therefore the follow-up accountability mechanism, which basically address how effective are ADB operations in terms of delivering results, are also being adjusted. ADB, having hold itself fully accountable, has a corporate results framework which is basically structured into two sections, which are broad development results, which are the ultimate aims of the entire ADB set of operations, as well as what it does internally in terms of accountability. In this, the larger framework, in the broad development framework, to check what it does is actually relevant to the development of the region, it uses the Asia-Pacific Regional MDG report as a kind of external check mechanism to ensure the relevance of its operations. So this report is really very, very relevant. Here's a picture of the report for all of you to see. And so the development effectiveness then follows down the line in terms of how best its money is used, how the staff function, etc. There's a similar development effectiveness report for private sector operations, given that the private sector is going to be progressively more important, and we cannot rely purely on fiscal resources and soft money from donors to deliver results. So that's also an accountability platform that is taken into account. Now, the joint work that ADB does with UNDP and ESCAP has been online for almost 10 years, which has helped to keep the broad direction of ADB operations linked to on-ground realities and development impacts. Learning from both these internal accountability mechanisms and the external validation kind of platform, which is really a knowledge product, here are some points to be considered, which will questions and issues for a regional development accountability platform. One is to identify which stakeholders and what can the regional platform and regional action do with respect to each category of stakeholders that we want to engage with at a regional level. We know the stakeholders, the governments are the states, as well as non-state actors, which include businesses, civil society, think tanks, as well as the media. Sometimes we have not engaged enough with some of these actors. So what can regional action do in this regard for accountability? At which levels do we engage? So the regional platform, how can it address both global as well as country level action? Which sectors? Regional platforms typically have little political accountability and little political clout. So what can be the value added of regional platforms? And this tends to be really in terms of sectoral and knowledge related issues, much stronger focus on norms and standards. So this is where value addition can be done. Then again, to conclude, leadership commitment itself is going to be very, very important for accountability. Leadership, not just the states and governments, but also the rest of the leadership, business leaders, civil society leaders, etc. This, therefore, needs not just regional platforms which are high quality knowledge, credible and knowledge-based, but we have been somewhat remiss in terms of effective dissemination in the past. And so going forward, capacity development and dissemination will have to be just as important. So I'll end with a very strong voice on behalf of two types of bottlenecks in accountability going forward. One is data, information, and type of bottlenecks, which can undermine accountability. And second is monitoring of institutional bottlenecks, which can also undermine accountability. So I'll end with this. Without these two, addressing these two types of bottlenecks, we will be remiss, we will be kind of incomplete in our goals for sustainable development, which will cover going forward social inclusion to promote sustainability, economic prosperity, so relevant data on that, and environmental responsibility, which will all the three have to go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the perspectives of ADB's internal corporate accountability mechanism. I'm sure there are some lessons to be learned for the broader development agenda and institutions' accountability. Regional development banks such as Asian Development Bank and African Development Banks are quite a premier institution given the focus that they have on the region, and they can be very important partners in development for all the regional institutions. I now would like to open up the floor, and I suggest that I indicate up front that it would be useful to kind of have questions as questions. Of course, feel free to give a comment as long as it's a little contained. I'm not going to stop you, but I would, given the time that we have at hand, I would very much encourage succinct interventions. I will take questions from the floor in 2 rounds of about 3 to 4 questions each round, and then turn to the Twitter, where we will have another few sets of questions that will be brought to me, and I'll open it up to the panelist. I haven't as yet received the Twitter, but hopefully I will in due course from my colleagues. So I see a hand there. I'm afraid I'm not wearing my distant glasses. CSOs, please. Okay, we'll come to you.
Thank you so much. Nurgul Janaeva from Kyrgyzstan, representing Asia Pacific Regional CSOs Engagement Mechanism. We have several comments, and thank you very much, Madam Chair, for allowing to share our perspectives. First of all, the civil society thinks that the approach to the regional accountability process and mechanism should be based on participatory democracy. And when listening to all speakers, we confirmed that this will be a useful approach. Secondly, regional accountability should integrate regional mechanisms of human rights, and we were happy to read that it is going to follow this process, and I think this will be very useful. For example, currently going on a regional mechanism reviewing on women's rights as Beijing Platform for Action, Beijing +20, and we call to integrate these mechanisms inside. Being as a key Asia-Pacific regional monitoring framework, the new accountability framework should ensure institutional space for CSOs, and we are very happy that Ms. Kelkar shared about the regional CSOs engagement mechanism. I would like to call attention of the states that are here and the different stakeholders that this mechanism includes 16 constituencies, and we are open to widen it, and it has 5 sub-regions, and we call for recognition at sub-regional and national levels. We are sure that regional accountability mechanism should be inclusive in process, and it should be held in all sub-regions at least annually within the coming period. We have several recommendations to the principles of accountability, so that to make a shift from eclectic accountability to comprehensive. First, it should be systematic, the principle being systematic, which means have a mechanism including multi-stakeholder consultation, feedback mechanisms from beneficiaries, from different countries, from different layers, accountability of all development partners, including business and donors. Secondly, the second principle of accountability, we consider regularity, at least once a year, openness, with immediate access to everyone. And we were happy to hear that speakers were telling about the language. Openness means that understandable, no ownership if people don't understand what we are speaking about. Inclusiveness, with participation of all development actors, of beneficiaries, constituencies, at all levels of monitoring are important. timeliness. The lessons learned from the previous monitoring of development showed that majority accountability mechanisms were based then accountable after everything is finished when you cannot change anything. Timeliness should be one of the principles. And the last one, accountability should be results oriented. Thank you very much for your attention and possibility to share.
Respecting the time limit. Let me turn to the member states now. I call on the Russian Federation delegate.
Спасибо, госпожа исполнительный секретарь. Я постараюсь быть
Thank
кратким и
you.
конкретным. Прежде всего, у меня небольшая реплика,
Madam Chair,
связанная
first
с
of all, I
важным
would like
вопросом,
to
который был
respond
затронут одним из ораторов.
on one of the issues raised, one of the questions raised by one of the panelists as regards the participation of the private sector. In the UN sector, there is a platform for interaction with the private sector. Last year, there was the Global Compact Summit, at which that
Может быть, нам следовало бы подумать над тем, как усилить взаимодействие региональных комиссий и Global Compact для того, чтобы повысить узнаваемость, востребованность и отдачу от этой важной платформы. А вторая часть моего выступления, собственно, касается вопроса, и вопрос я хотел бы задать всем сегодняшним докладчикам, которые сейчас находятся на подиуме. Речь идет о том, что в течение сегодняшнего дня в основном мы слышим ссылки на один возможный механизм мониторинга, так называемый peer review. И, на мой взгляд, оно не совсем является подходящим как раз для целей обзора прогресса с точки зрения осуществления повестки дня в области развития, потому что подразумевает некое вынесение оценочных суждений и вердикта. Вместе с тем у нас существует хорошо себя зарекомендовавшая и утвердившаяся исторически форма мониторинга в рамках экономического и социального совета, то есть главного органа, который уполномочен осуществлять мониторинг в этой области. Это национальные презентации. И в этой связи я хотел бы услышать, вот когда мы готовились к этому заседанию, рассматривалась ли эта форма и какие у наших докладчиков, собственно, оценки эффективности именно этого механизма, который мы рассматриваем как весьма эффективный, и который мог бы и служить нам дальше. Спасибо.
Okay, any other? Yes, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, this is Ziaur Rahman from Awaz Center for Development Services, Pakistan. I'm representing a regional CSO engagement mechanism. Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me time. In fact, you know, while we are talking about the accountability, we all understand what really it means. We should all understand that we are accountable to the people to whom we have been representing. So we need to redefine the word accountability as we are redefining our agenda post 2015. We have this experience of communicating with the grassroots level people, and we understood with our experience that people did not have any understanding about the MDGs, even passing 15 years. So what we want is that people should have this information, this quality and timely information regarding the accountability of post-2015 development agenda well on time. And what we believe is that this digitalization of information do not mean that everybody in the planet have access to all these information. So we need to take care of those people who do not have access to all these digital gadgets. This is important. While talking, I would like to share some thoughts about the regional accountability mechanisms. We have experienced one in South Asia that is related to the SECOSON, South Asian Conference on Sanitation. They practiced a traffic light paper to hold the governments accountable regarding their commitments on right to sanitation. And that worked very well. What I would suggest is that we need to build upon the experiences that we have made in the past. since we believe that the accountability is largely related to the fiscal and the financial matters. In most of the countries in South Asia, we have seen the weak fiscal disciplines. And Madam Chair, I believe that you understand what really means by the fiscal disciplines. We need to introduce certain mechanisms that must ensure good governance and fiscal disciplines in all these countries. In the countries where the democracies are weak, people are unable to hold accountable to us. We are also accountable to the people. We are the primary beneficiaries. The people who are sitting in this room are also primary beneficiaries of the post-2015. We believe that the accountability mechanism that we are going to propose should be inclusive in a manner that it includes the private sector, who is actually considering this post-2015 as an opportunity, a greater opportunity at all levels. What I'm going to suggest is the regional platforms need to be strengthened because they really do not talk about the development agendas. Most of their agendas are related to the politics, the regional politics, and somehow peace building and human security issues. These issues are very, very important. But while we talk about the post-2015 agendas and the MDGs preferences, these regional platforms do not give any political ownership to these agendas. I think we need to strengthen these regional platforms around the post-2015. And I would like to re-emphasize about this digitalization of information. There are so many people in this world that do not have access to the digital communications. So please do not forget them. They should not be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any member states that may have an additional?
I am Kavita Gautam from Nepal, being a focal point for children and youth for Asia Pacific region, CSO engagement mechanism. I would like to speak on behalf of Major Group for Children and Youth from Asia Pacific region. The session have been highlighting frequently on technology transfer, social media, data revolution, monitoring and reporting, incentives, participatory budget. Many panelists have addressed role of youth as an important catalyst for future projection on accountability. On this, I would like to recommend that we appeal for regional bodies to enable and push national government for creating platforms for young people engagement in national accountability mechanism. We see monitoring, evaluation, and reporting process as an important opportunity for young people by engaging them in and move faster towards accountability, which will benefit both the stakeholders by increasing human resources as well as providing a platform for decent jobs for young people. While talking about technology transfer, our generation needs the advancement with latest technology, not the old one, and build capacity, fulfilling the gaps between Asia-Pacific region and other regions, including the gaps within the region between poor and rich countries. We urge to develop a mechanism for the budget mobilization for young people engagement in development process from regional level and invest more on creating platform for young people for their innovation and initiative that targets for sustainable development of their communities. It is a plus point that Asia-Pacific region has high population of young people living within this region and can be mobilized for both data collection, tracking, sharing, and bring revolution, as well as the regional bodies, including national bodies, should take advantage of being youth in this region very active in social media. Last but not the least, I would like to know if any of the countries have any example for how they are engaging the young people in their country for mapping the accountability for development processes towards sustainability, and if there is any proposed mechanism within post-2015 development framework at national level within the Asia-Pacific region? Thank you.
I think we have a question towards the end of this intervention. There were some implicit questions. I would call on our 4 panelists to, in their respective areas, to make an effort to reflect on the comments and questions. So I would start with you, Your Excellency.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much.
Был первый вопрос от
So
Российской
the first
Федерации
question
по
came from
вопросам
the Russian
оценки
Federation
научных исследований, мониторинга.
about
с этим
assessing
связано.
data.
Ну, говоря о мониторинге, это прежде всего наличие информации. Наличие, не просто ее наличие, ее доступ, ее объективность и так далее, и так далее. Все критерии, которые относятся к информации. Мы в своей комиссии, когда делаем оценочные исследования, конечно, мы основываемся на существующей информации, официальной информации. Это статистика, это единовременные исследования, это международные отчеты и так далее, и так далее. И, конечно же, у нас существует проблема. Почему? Потому что информация, она в разных странах, будем сказать, в разной полноте и в разной доступности и объективности. И здесь у нас существуют определенные какие-то проблемы, которые мы в оценочных исследованиях, конечно, отражаем. В настоящее время мы сегодня обсуждаем вопрос сделать единое информационное пространство Центральной Азии, объединив потенциал региональных структур, не только Международного фонда спасения РАЛ, куда входят 2 структуры. Это структура по управлению водными ресурсами и наша комиссия, а также региональный гидрометеорологический центр, ну и другие. Мы сейчас обсуждаем вопрос, как объединить этот потенциал, чтобы покрыть те недостатки, которые у нас есть, и делать ту информацию, которая необходима для общественности и принятия решений. Спасибо.
May I turn to my left first to you, Mr.
No, thank you, moderator. The only point that I'd like to just add is, again, bringing it back to this issue of political commitment and political accountability. And I think while at the regional level, again, bringing it to the example of the Cairns Compact, as a regional is a political mandate, I mean, it becomes meaningless if at the national level it's not implemented or given any utility. So, I mean, the political commitment at the regional level needs to be reinforced through political action at the national level. And I think this is where I draw on the example of the peer reviews at the national level, because it's a demonstration of political leaders and officials to open up their country systems for scrutiny and for assessment. And I think this is where, in the Pacific, where we've had 13 of our Pacific Island members of the Pacific Islands Forum open up their country systems for scrutiny by other government officials and development partners, is a reflection, again, of the political leadership and ownership that a peer review process can reinforce, but at the same time a demonstration of how a regional accountability mechanism manifests itself at the national level.
Thank you to our delegate from the National Statistical Office of Thailand.
I would like to echo from the floor, as I heard from the floor, that see that data and statistics is very important for accountability, and the link between the data and accountability is data must be accurate, timely, complete, and international comparable, and more important is accessible for all, because I heard from the floor that the information should be accessible, and from information or data that accompany with the indicator for each sustainable development goal that we are talking about, and it will show how or what is happening with the Sustainable Development Agenda, apart from seeing through the procedure of monitoring, reviewing, or evaluation. We see through the indicator with the statistic or data. And from this, we should be able to get a clue or a kind of system to warn us what is going to happen next with the sustainable development agenda. So it's clear that data is very important, and it is important for accountability. Statistical development in the global level or regional level or even the country level try to capture and recognize and try to build or establish the architecture or infrastructure in order to ensure that the process of data production and services is standardized and can really produce the quality data in order to ensure that the SDG is accomplished and can be achieved for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to also offer the floor to our discussants in case they'd like to pick up any of the questions and provide their perspectives, should they feel the need.
Look, just a quick one to endorse the issue of peer review. We often get focused on SAARC and ASEAN, but the Pacific Islands Forum, it's 1/3 of our region. And to have seen countries in the 13 or so countries in the Pacific, the Cook Islands, one of our smallest, is actually going to meet all the MDGs. They've had a process of communicating with people in the Cook Islands, and people there understand what the MDGs are about. But also if you look at Papua New Guinea, which has been very transparent about the areas where they're not going to meet MDGs. So there seems to have been more communication within the Pacific about measurement not being a threatening situation. So I think the rest of us can actually learn a lot from what's happened in the Pacific. You know, with their big small islands development meeting coming up, and you've got big issues on climate change, but also huge on gender and other social issues involved there. Kiribati, Tonga, civil society and the political leaders are all meeting together and sharing in the Talaloa, the Pacific way of looking at things. So I'd be a big push for the peer review process.
Just a quick comment from myself. I'd just like to express my complete support to the suggestion from the Russian Federation regarding the strengthening of the UN Global Compact. I think I completely agree that the UN Global Compact is an important and can be an effective platform for private sector engagement in this region. It does have a presence here and has local networks in Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. And a new network in Myanmar. And so by strengthening the UN Global Compact and getting private sector commitment to the 10 principles of the Global Compact, combined with other internationally accepted frameworks such as the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, the ILO Tripartite Declaration, and ISO 26000, it can really provide an important frame for engagement with the private sector and a better understanding as to what should we expect from the private sector in terms of accountability and their contributions to the development agenda.
I think all I would like to say is that the regional accountability platform will, of course, be very, very important. We should design it in such a way that it's very strategic, so that it can influence countries, it can support countries, and it can influence the global accountability agenda, as well as bring Asia and Pacific perspectives onto the global stage, so that Asian priorities and Pacific priorities are not lost in global aggregation. The second is regional value addition should be the guiding principle. What can we do to add value to standard accountability? Third, I would strongly recommend cascading, the idea of cascading in the sense that the project level work, sector level, let's say the agriculture sector or environment, energy sector, or whatever, the project level work, sectoral work, country level work, and regional level efforts are all aligned in the sense that they are not contradictory and there's no crisscrossing of efforts over there. So that would help us ensuring that the results are well aligned and accountability therefore makes sense along those lines. And the last thing is that the shared regional platform on accountability is a very good idea. We can also combine it with customization so that sub-regional specificities are very well taken care of, and we support ultimately countries and our final clients, which are the people.
Now, I made a terrible mistake of missing out one of our of not identifying one of our panelists in trying to respond to a question. So I'd like to turn to Ms. Govind Kalkar to offer her perspectives on some of the questions raised.
I would be brief because of the time constraint, but otherwise I had to share some examples. One of the things that Ziaul Rahman from Pakistan raised point about digitalization of information. I think one thing that has spread to a sub-region, at least South Asian region, is really Right to Information Act. This exists in India and it had been used by people, so that it exists in Bangladesh and Pakistan. I think it has been passed 2013. So these are what I wanted to suggest, is that we should also draw on the examples that already exist. So accountability is not really that blank platform. There is something, there are good examples that we should learn. The same thing is about women's reservation in the local governance. This also exists in all the countries of the sub-region, 33%. And these are the good examples and that we should take into account. Including Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. This is the country. There are other things, but Kavita's question was that mapping, young people's involvement in mapping of education is one thing, that what is the quality of education, what is the dropout rate, and young people have been involved in that in mapping this kind of, this is a very big aspect of accountability because the development of human resources. UN Global Compact is also exist in India. They have the office and they have also really signed some empowerment principles. When I was in the UN Women, I was negotiating with them. So that is a very important terms in terms of making the act on accountability of the CSR. In India, last year we passed the law that is the 2% of the profits of the companies had to go for the purposes of education and economic empowerment and other things. So such kind of legislation should be taken into account, and how we can really make them effective. Implementation may be a problem, we don't know, it is the new thing that has happened. But I wanted to share some of these examples in order to really say that what exists in terms of the accountability and how it can be further built up at the regional level and also at the global level. Thank you.
Thank you for those insights. Let me now turn to the final question from Twitter. And I'm not going to call on any specific, but whoever wants to contribute can raise their hand from the panel. How can ordinary people hold government and regional institutions accountable in implementing the SDGs? I wish we had a magic solution to it. But please, let's start from the left.
I think it needs
just one little
cooperation.
Soundbite.
Cooperation from all.
Cooperation from all players and actors.
No, I mean, I would say the same. It's not there's no straightforward answer, but it does require, and pardon to sound cliche, it does require an holistic sort of effort across all stakeholders, and that accountability should not be seen as a linear process, but one that looks across the different actors as well, as opposed to, from a top to bottom and bottom up, but also across. Thank you.
Спасибо. Здесь, мне кажется, не нужно так резко нас расчленять.
We are all ordinary people in this connection. We shouldn't see anybody as being more special than anybody else. So here, basically, what we're talking about is us. So we need, of course, this cooperation, partnership. We need to try and understand each other.
One thing that I see the value of election system, that is the democratic system, because if they know that you are not going to vote them in power, that works, and ordinary people do hold them accountable, and we repeatedly see this kind of, that is the one kind of asset that we see. And people do understand that who has benefited them and which government is working and which government is not working. And there is a change, this kind of happens. So we should not undermine really that people don't understand women, including women, for land rights. Land has been given to in Pakistan, in India, by ordinary women who are not literate or semi-literate kind of thing. So probably I would give this kind of positive example. Thank you.
Any last minute thoughts or comments by way of comments or questions from the member states in particular? If not, I'd like to try to sum up this very quickly. I think it has been a very interesting and stimulating session. It's interesting because of the range of ideas and suggestions floated. It had some specific messages, but also some micro details in it. So it's not going to be that easy to collate this at a very fast pace. But the first message and the most important I heard was enhance political leaders' commitment and examination of challenges of political economy in the accountability process. I think this applies, of course, to all the tiers of accountability, but I think given the complexity of the regional accountability, it requires more regional political partnership, as I see, would be my takeaway on that. Second was the message on agreement on scope of regional accountability mechanism with its focus on review, monitoring, and evaluation. And I think all these three elements are very important in getting clarity on the regional accountability mechanism. The third point that my take home was how regional monitoring and accountability complements and reinforces national effort. It's key that regional and national monitoring accountability align, as we need conformity in the frameworks of regional accountability framework. An attendant issue in this context, or a need in this context, is that of regional comparability and standardization, as well as timely availability of data and reporting on SDGs, because otherwise we may not have effective regional framework of accountability if one country is reporting on different measurement basis. Or so that requires, of course, as somebody said, that we would like ESCAP Statistics Commission to be strengthened. We fully appreciate that advice, so we take on board that. But it would also require a very stronger relationship between the Statistics Commission of ESCAP and the regional bodies' statistical efforts. We have ASEAN working on various dimensions in statistics. We have the Asian Development Bank. So I hope that all the regional partners will collect together and work in a conform manner to support the objective of standardization, comparability, and timely availability of the regional data. Another message that I heard was that regional accountability framework need to be enhanced by bringing an element of regional peer reviews. So the dynamics have to be structured in a way that we have a peer review, including the voices of private sector and civil society, with an objective to reshape the country's systems and countries' processes to be able to feed into the accountability framework. I also heard an element of demand for a need for broader agreement on the contours of the accountability mechanism in terms of not only just monitoring, review, and evaluation, but if I were to stretch it, it probably meant the dimensions that it will cover. Clearly, every country will have, if we are going to talk about the national realities and if countries differ in the adoption of the agenda of the sustainable development, then how do you get the common platform? I'm stretching the point a little from what was said to make some sense out of that message. Another 6 point that I would say that came out was the sub-regional monitoring and accountability frameworks and approaches should play an important role in developing a joint strategy for the regional accountability. I think this is a very important element. Role of private sector in corporate social responsibility and elements has to be defined, including, of course, the elements of ISO and Global Compact, as you pointed out towards the end. But the key message was that we need to go beyond viewing private sector as resource raising only to encouraging good behavior and sustainability in production patterns and so on and so forth. This needs to be complemented by establishing corporate social responsibility tracking mechanisms. And finally, a view was pointed out that we could probably consider legislative, maybe too strong a word, but some compliance code or code for requirement of requiring corporates to allocate funding for certain elements of sustainable development agenda. I'm sure I've missed out some core elements. I'm trying to just pull the generic messages out of this forum. With this, I'd like to thank all the panelists and our discussant for bringing a lot of value addition to the thinking on regional accountability, which is going to be the most complex task for all of us. But remember, there will be more debates on regional accountability because we want to bring in more existing examples and institutional mechanisms and platform, the real ones that have worked and not worked, to think through this. And of course, we will have UN-wide effort. Our colleagues from other regional commissions will also bring in their good practices of the regional mechanisms. So we will have a very much we will have enough time to draw on all these debates before we bring to the table a more kind of workable, simple mechanism, as I said. So can I request for an applause for my panelists and discussant? Thank you. Thank you very much for participating in this panel.